And we are live. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the stream. I hope you're all doing well. I don't know what the weather is in your member state. In Belgium, it's snowing quite heavily these days, so that's pretty, but not very April-like, I would say. Not the weather you would hope for, but well, that's always nice to see. So I'm very happy to have you all here for tonight's interview on this channel with a new member of the European Parliament. Tonight we will discuss with Dutch MEP Mohammed Chahim from the Socialists and Democrats group, so on the left side of European politics. He's 35 and has been an MEP since 2019, so it's his first mandate. He is a member of the Committee on the Environment, Public Health and Food Safety, and is also a vice chair in the Committee of Inquiry on the Protection of Animals during Transport, so that's quite specific. He is also a substitute member in the Industry, Research and Energy Committee. But before we start our conversation, as usual, I remind you the house rules for anyone who is new with us tonight. So, and by the way, hi everyone, I see that the chat is already busy with the usual Zeri, Ikarov, Karpas, this is Talias. Hello to you, I know you subscribed today, so thank you for joining us through the discussion. Hello Mike. So, as usual, our guest will be with us for about an hour. After that, he will leave and I will keep streaming for 15 minutes to half an hour to discuss with you all about what you thought about the interview, what I thought about it, whether there are topics that might require additional element explanation. So I have my little piece of paper to take notes. As usual, I have prepared my own questions for Mr. Chahim, and I collected questions from people on Reddit, Discord, and Twitter. You can also ask your own questions via the chat. We'll keep an eye on it as usual and pick among your suggestions. So feel free to participate and react, but don't spam and stay nice. As always, nothing new for anyone who's been the usual here. So the goal of these interviews is for you to understand what is the job of an MEP. Also, getting to know Mr. Chahim, what his priorities are, and maybe some of his opinions in general on general EU political questions. So we will not go deep into policy discussions, and we will not touch on national politics unless it's relevant to EU politics. So keep that in mind when you ask your questions. I already see some question from Karpas. I will answer this one at the end, but you will be disappointed. So anyway, let's do this and let's start the actual interview. So good evening and welcome to you, Mohammed Chahim. Thank you again for accepting to do this interview on my channel. You heard me explain it to our viewers. The goal of tonight is to put faces on the European Union and help people understand better what's happening in Brussels, and tonight to get to know you a bit better and try to understand what you stand for and what you think about the EU. So as it has become tradition, I will let you briefly introduce yourself to start the discussion, and then we'll pick up from there. So the floor is yours.
Well, thank you for having me, first of all. My name is Mohammed Chahim, as you already mentioned. I'm 35 years old. I'm from the Netherlands, from the south of the Netherlands. It's a very small village called Helmond. It's not far away from Eindhoven. Maybe people will know that. And since July 2019, I'm an MEP for the Socialists and Democrats group for the Dutch Labour Party, the same party as Frans Timmermans led during the elections. And we won the elections in 2019 and I became an MEP. Before my MEP life, I was a researcher, a scientist at the Dutch Institute for Applied Scientific Research, where I basically most of my time was working on models related to the energy transition. I did some work for the European Commission. I do not know whether people know the framework programs that were before the Horizon program. What should I say more? I studied econometrics and I did a master in microeconomics and I have a PhD in optimization.
Oh, so you're both a scientist, an energy expert, and an economist. That's quite a lot of expertise there, and quite a rich life before becoming an MEP. So, what's bringing you from going to being an economist / scientist to becoming and going into politics and then becoming an MEP?
Well, I was already a member of the local municipal council in Helmond, starting 2006, up to the moment I was elected in the European Parliament. So I've been a member of the local parliament, the local municipality for almost 14 years. And I led my party the last 2 elections. So I was leading the party. I was the head of delegation in 2014 and during the 2018 elections. So I've been in politics quite a while. And of course, in my professional work, I was working a lot on energy modeling, environmental issues, circular economy, and basically the two combined. So I was approached by some people in the party that asked me whether it was interesting for me to go to Brussels because, of course, climate-related issues were going to be in the core of the European policy making. And I said, okay, it's fine. For me, it's very interesting to combine both things, two of my passions in one. And to be honest, I didn't expect us to do that good during the elections, but Frans Timmermans did a wonderful job as the leader of our party in Europe, but also in the Netherlands. And we won the elections and I became an MEP.
Okay, well, Loy Pesha is asking from what party you are from. So you're from the Labour Party in the Netherlands.
Yes, Dutch Labour Party, P van de A, it's called.
All right, so basically, so the way I understand it, the party came to you and asked you to run from the European election. So prior to that, when they came to you, so I understand that you have worked a bit with the European Commission as part of your previous life. But what was your idea of EU politics before you actually became an MEP?
So I was a scientist in the Netherlands, and we participated in different. They're called the framework programs. You had Framework Program 5, Framework Program 7. They were basically the predecessors of the Horizon program. So in that, I participated in many research projects where I was basically developing models, looking at, for example, the effects of climate-related policies in relation to labor, to jobs, developing detailed transport models, we called it generalized equilibrium models. So basically where you have economics and environmental indicators in one model. So to study policy making, to do basically impact assessments, but we were developing the models. Again, for me, and I was a politician, and in my city council, I was working on. I mean, as a politician in the Labour Council, you work on different policies from healthcare to youth manifestation to infrastructure. I mean, it's what you do when you're a local municipal.
No, of course. But,
member.
When it comes to European politics, how much awareness did you have about how the EU worked as a whole?
The funny thing is, when I was a bachelor student, I studied econometrics and operations research, and I wrote a small thesis. My bachelor thesis was about was basically combining two of my passions at that time. It was game theory with economics. So I did an analysis of the enlargement of the European Union and how to deal with the power indicators within the parliament and in the council. So how can you allocate new seats to new members, looking at the current power division. So that was in my bachelor thesis. I was quite fascinated about the European Union. So I was looking at it from a game theoretical approach where you look at equilibria, and I was trying to calculate, okay, if we add another country, how should we reallocate the seats to make sure that the change in power is kept as equal as possible.
Oh, interesting.
And so already when I was quite young, I was always working on the European topics. But for me, it was just I was very curious, to understand how the dynamics went in the parliament. Because of course you have political groups, but within the political groups, you have, of course, the national priorities. And also it really depends on whether the party is part of the government in the member state. So there are a lot of dynamics within that parliament. And I was really fascinated to understand how it really works. But to be honest, when I became an MEP and tried to understand how the European Parliament worked, it was really completely new for me. I mean, in national politics, you have a lot of debates, a lot of topics are being debated over and over again. I mean, I think the European Parliament is quite technical. I mean, there are some debates, but you have the rapporteurs and then the shadows that have a certain file, and then they negotiate between themselves about what the compromise should look, and then they go back to the groups. I mean, I think it's a quite technical parliament compared to parliaments in the member state. I mean, this is my experience up to now. I'm not judging it. I'm not saying it's bad or worse, because sometimes if I look at certain debates on the member state level, I really think, okay, let's go back to the content, because I really believe that the European Parliament is quite content driven.
Exactly. I'm just going to pick up a question from the chat who's asking what's a shadow. So when you have a file in the parliament, each political group is appointing a representative who will follow the file on behalf of the political group. So the main person, the leading person, you call the rapporteur, and then is surrounded by a team of representative from the other political groups who you call shadow rapporteur. So you will always have references to shadows, rapporteurs. So that's basically designate the team of negotiator for the inside the parliament on each file. And so it's this team of rapporteur and shadows that go into the nitty-gritty of each file and negotiate compromises, and also to a good extent define the group line on each file. So it's a way to divide work within each committee and within each group. Okay.
It really looks. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I really believe that it's quite. I mean, the way that the European Parliament is designed has a quite big French influence. Am I mistaken? Because I also saw that in the French Parliament they have rapporteurs, and they have, or maybe I'm wrong, but sometimes I have the idea that it has a lot of.
Actually, historically speaking, you are right, because basically the way the parliament was designed at the very beginning of when parliament was created, so it was like many things, a Franco-German compromise, and the idea was that the German defined more or less the power play, the way the parliament would work inside. So the fact that it's you don't have like a one-party majority. It's more of like a coalition kind of things. While the French got, let's say, all the decorum. So all the structure of the parliament is actually was designed partly on what the French parliament looks like. So that's why you have a lot of common appellations. That's why you have the people in the staff, the parliamentary staff in fancy suits, when you have the plenary. So all that is basically legacy from the origin of the parliament and from French parliamentary protocol. So that's, you are right that indeed there are similarities to French parliament in this. You are totally right. But moving on from this topic, so as you know, I'm not telling that to you. I'm saying that to the audience. So MEPs are often specialized. So you already hinted to that. What are your topics on which you usually work in Parliament? What are your specialties?
I work a lot on the climate-related topics. I mean, I'm quite passionate about climate change, how to deal with it. So basically, that's one of my main core issues that I work on, and it's quite diverse. So I mean, if we look at the upcoming program of the European Commission, it's called the Fit for 55 project. Basically, how can we make sure that we decrease CO2 emissions in 2030 with 55%, at least 55% compared to 1990. We see that there will be a very big package coming on with emission trading system, with carbon border adjustment mechanism, with effort sharing regulation. A lot of policy will come to the Parliament, so there will be a lot of work. But of course, I'm also very interested in technology, industry policies, artificial intelligence, and of course now we're all I'm the spokesperson of my party, of the Dutch Labour Party in the European Parliament when it comes to the corona related issues.
Okay.
So I'm very active on that as well.
quite a busy portfolio, I would say. Just a question out of curiosity. So on climate change, whenever we're talking about climate change, there's always this CO2 reduction target. So reducing 55% compared to 1990, the level of 1990. Right now, at what level are we compared to 1990 in terms of emission?
Globally or European? In Europe?
Both, as you can tell, but...
Globally, to be honest, I have no idea.
Then on the European level,
European level, I have to cheat because I do not know the
precise
I think
figure.
in 2020 target was, if I'm not mistaken, around was it? You see, now you're asking me a question that I have to...
Sorry about that.
I think it was just over... I know the Dutch target. It has to be above around 20%, but please correct me if...
Okay, well, it was just out
of...
It
was. I think it was the... 2020 was very easy because it was reducing, increasing energy efficiency by 20%, reducing CO2 by 20%. If I'm not mistaken, it was something like that. But maybe please correct me. Maybe one of your viewers can correct me. If I'm not mistaken, it was around 20%. 20%, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
Okay.
So it was reduce CO2 by 20%. 20% renewables. Yeah. Sorry, that was my why I was lagging a bit. So it was 2020 is 20% renewables, 20% CO2 reduction, and 20% improving energy efficiency. But whether I think we didn't make that target, if I'm not mistaken. At least the Netherlands didn't make it, but I think in Europe as a whole, we also just didn't meet the target.
So we missed already the moving target, and we'll have, I guess, to be more ambitious for the future. Still
I think the biggest problem there is, I really believe that we have to be ambitious as a parliament. That's why we have fought hard to first follow the science and put 65% in there. And then in the climate law, we made a compromise for 60% because we know that the council will water it down. But for me, the most important thing is how will we bridge that final 20-30%? That's a very important topic we have to discuss because if we look at current technologies, I think McKinsey has analyzed that approximately 87% of the total target in 2050 can be met with current technologies. We still have a gap of 13, maybe even 20% of technologies that are still not in place. I can give you one example, if I may, because I'm quite passionate, of course.
Sure, go ahead.
If we look at our current energy mix, we are approximately using 20%, I call it energy electrons, so basically electricity. And we are currently using 80% of approximately 80% are energy atoms. So basically something, something that you can hold, like gas or oil or so the fossils. If we look at all energy scenarios, we know that by 2050, some scientists say we can reach 50 or maybe 60% electrification. So we still have 40% energy atoms that we need. And if I look at the current developments, then I see that, of course, in sustainable energy, if we look at electricity by solar or by wind or by that, we have that technology to reach that 50 or 60%. We have to maybe improve the grids, introduce smart grids, have some batteries, etc. But we will manage. My biggest issue is if I look at the current energy atoms, then we are really falling behind. And of course, people are talking about hydrogen now, but hydrogen, we need a little bit, we need to develop the hydrogen economy. But I really want to focus in the parliament debating on how can we make sure that we meet that final 2050 target. Because there we really need a lot of investments from the governments. We maybe need to not only, we need to co-invest with maybe some of the industries. We need to partner with them to make sure that the gap between an investment that's sufficient and makes sense and basically the cost of the technologies, whether they are cost effective for industry, or we need to develop, but we need to invest a little bit more in R&D to make sure that these solutions are on the table. I mean, that's what I would love to have a debate on. And now, because we're only talking about the 2030 target, and we are really having a hard fight on whether it should be 60 or 65 or 55%, we are missing the debate when we have to. I mean, the real debate is, of course, we have to be we have to set the target as high as possible, because we are lagging behind a little bit. But we also have to make sure that we have the right technologies in place. We need to invest in research. We need to invest in science. And that's also something that, if I look at the budgets of a lot of researchers all over Europe, that has been dropping and dropping and dropping. I mean, and that's something that really worries me, because the real solutions, I mean, as I said, 87% approximately, let's say 80% of the technologies are in place, but the last final bit, for that we really need to develop a lot, still a lot. And sometimes we are missing that debate, and we really think, okay, I mean, in the right wing of the political spectrum, they say, we can use nuclear energy and then we're done. And maybe sometimes in the left part of the political spectrum, they are oversimplifying, we can solve everything with renewables. I mean, the problem is a bit too complex. And it's not like a zero-sum game. We really need to have different options on the table. We need to make sure we are really on the right track to finally in 2050 become climate neutral. And a lot of money is needed for that. And we need to make sure that it's also paid by the right people, because at the end of the day, it's ridiculous that consumers in Europe approximately pay 200 euros per ton CO2. And if you are a big multinational, you almost pay like below 20 euros 20 euros per ton CO2,
per ton, yeah.
Which is crazy in my mind. Yeah.
Okay, so I will, since we've gone on the topic of energy, I had already a couple of questions on it, so we'll stay on that, and then we'll go to other topics. So that's a question that came from Ikaros, which is it's the same question that he asked the last time to another MEP, Jutta Paudos, a colleague of you from the Green Party. And so the question was, wind, hydro, solar, nuclear, where should Europe invest? Why and why not? And so he adds that he's interested because of the Netherlands' high proportion of fossil fuel reliance, in spite of all that North Sea access and the habit for taming the environment on a national scale. Genuinely, he doesn't know why. So,
I mean, if you look at it from, I think it depends on the country, and it also depends where we want to put our limited number of money as European Union. I mean, I think it makes sense that if we look at countries surrounding the North Sea, countries like Sweden, Denmark, Netherlands, England, United Kingdom. Okay, even though they're not part of the EU and Norway. I mean, I think the North Sea is quite interesting to have big wind farms.
Yes.
I mean, if I look at like the levelized cost of energy, as they call it, for wind on sea, offshore wind, I mean, it looks really good. I mean, cost effectively, the price is dropping and dropping, and the windmills are becoming bigger and bigger. And I think it's better to have them on sea than have them on land, because sometimes they really can pollute the beautiful countryside in certain areas. I mean, I can accept that when people say it. When it comes to solar, I do believe that. I mean, the southern countries like Spain, Italy, Greece, etc. I think Portugal have a very interesting business case. But I also really think that we need to look at the regions surrounding us. For example, North Africa or Africa in general. I think there, when it comes to solar, they have a vast the potential and the potential capacity of sustainable energy from those areas is, I've seen some numbers, it's like ridiculous, and the cost price is really low. So I think it's also time to reassess our strategic alliance with those type of countries to see whether we can have a win-win situation. I mean, we need a lot of energy, and it's almost impossible to have enough sustainable energy only from Europe. So we need to import a lot of energy, as we are doing now with fossil fuels. And I think it's possible because they're quite close. And then I'm looking at, for example, countries like the Ukraine, but also North Africa, countries like Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria, Egypt, etc. If they're stable and if they are willing to develop their country together with us, they also have to work a little bit on human rights, of course, which is very important. I think geographically they're so close that it's quite interesting to see whether we can develop projects together with them and whether we can export that energy either directly through the grid, because there are already two electricity cables going from Spain to, for example, Morocco, and are different gas pipes that go from, for example, Algeria to Spain, or from Algeria, I think, to Italy, and we have, I think, from Egypt to somewhere to, I think, Italy, but I'm not 100% sure. That infrastructure is there, so it could be interesting to see whether we can have strategic alliances with them, and whether we import it as electricity or we import it as hydrogen or as ammonia. That's up to the private companies to collaborate with each other and to decide. But I think it makes sense not only to have a critical infrastructure within Europe, but also to work together with those type of regions. And for example, the 2 times 40 gigawatt electrolysis capacity that the European Commission is developing now, it says 2 times 40 because why? 40 gigawatt is within Europe for Europe, and 40 gigawatt is outside Europe for Europe. So then the European Commission is looking at countries like Ukraine and North Africa.
And what about nuclear? Because I had it in the original question, and someone else, so Karpaz asks it in the chat. So, are there any plans for the EU to build more nuclear stations, or are all plans for the future renewable only? I mean, and what do you stand on the nuclear?
Again, so let me tell you something very basically. Yeah. So if you believe that climate change is a real problem, then all solutions should stay on the table, even if they are quite sensitive with respect to certain political groups. So for me, there shouldn't be any dogmas when it comes to this big crisis. But of course, when we look at nuclear energy, and if I look at the cost of the current technologies, then I really believe that the current generation of nuclear energy is dead. It's too expensive. And of course, without talking about the big waste problem that we will, which the next generation will inherit from us. But nuclear energy in general, talking about future generations, talking about, for example, nuclear fusion, we are developing now a big plant in the south of France.
Yeah.
I mean, there are institutes from all over the world that are developing that plant. And I've talked to some of the professors that from the Netherlands that are working on that project, and of course they say, listen, within the time frame to basically the 2050 target, it will really depend on whether we can commercialize the new technologies before, like around 2040. If that's possible, and of course they are in the development phase, we don't know whether they will finish in time. And the same holds for thorium or any other salt-based nuclear plant. But the new generations have a lot of positive, I mean, the negatives that we currently know of the nuclear plants can be tackled with these future generations. And which means that I do believe that after 2040, these new technologies can be part of our energy transition. Before that, if we now invest in these current technology, the current generation nuclear sites, then we are burning money for nothing. For now, we have to be smart with our money. We have to make sure that we invest in technologies that not only solve, not only look at the electrification of our energy system, but also look at these new to develop energy atoms, sustainable atoms like hydrogen or ammonia, etc. Yeah, so for me, if I have to choose now, I will invest in hydrogen. I will not invest in nuclear. That's not the issue. I mean, if you invest in nuclear, why would you do that? We already have a nuclear capacity in Europe. I mean, France has a lot compared to the Netherlands. And every energy transition scenario, whichever one you take, even from the IPCC, there's always between 10 to 20% nuclear incorporated. So, but when we talk about, do we want to produce new plants? I don't think that's a smart thing to do. I would say wait for the future technologies. Will we extend life of current plants? We will make sure that we don't close them down like directly. I think it's smart to wait before closing them down now. And this is something I know it's quite sensitive within the parliament, but keep the plants that we have as much as possible if they are secure enough and if they don't cost too much. I mean, let's be honest, at the end of the day, it's just an investment decision. But put the money in these future technologies that we need anyway. And that's in my opinion, hydrogen.
That's quite interesting because, well, like I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, we had your colleague Jutta Paulus, and we talked about nuclear energy, and so we talked as well about the ITER project, so the nuclear fusion project in the south of France, in Cadarache, and we asked, oh, well, do you think it's something worthwhile? And she said, oh, well, no, I don't believe in it. It's interesting as research, general research, but they always said that they would meet in 2030 the target, and then you move 2050, and she said, oh, yeah, it's always going to be postponed. It's always gonna stay like in a way science fiction. But you seem to be saying that it's still, even if it takes time, and that there are indeed challenges about the commercial exploitation of such an energy source, you still think it's worthwhile a worthwhile pursuit.
Of course. I mean, it's silly. Again, if you really believe that climate change is a problem, you have to make sure that all possible solutions stay on the table. Mm-hmm. And why should we block a technology that doesn't have the negative side effects that we currently have with nuclear energy? I mean, nuclear fusion has way less waste. Thorium has no waste, almost no waste. So, I mean, the biggest issue that we currently have with nuclear energy are the costs, and of course the side effect, basically the nuclear waste. I mean, if you get a technology that is cheap and and doesn't have the same waste, I mean, then it should be an option. I mean, and I believe in these scientists. I mean, some of them are friends of mine that are really working hard on this topic. If it's a breakthrough, then it will be a disruption for our solution. It can be. I mean, I'm very curious whether it will happen, yes or no. But blocking it now is silly. I mean, let's be honest. 2 years ago, almost no one was talking about hydrogen. The Commission launched a plan of the 2 times 40 gigawatt. You know what happened in the beginning of the year? A consortium has signed before the Commission comes with the real investment plans, etc. Because it will come this year. There is already a private consortium that in Spain that will produce 25 gigawatt electrolyzer capacity of green hydrogen. So basically, the market has already passed us. You know, they went faster than we think, but no one was talking about it. So again, if the economy is there and if all conditions are met, then we as basically as governments or as government bodies have to make sure that we push on the right buttons. And now it's not up to me to block a certain technology for developing. And there's another reason for that, because after 2050 we're not done. Some people think we have to be climate neutral by 2050 to meet the IPCC targets, but they don't understand the topic if they say that, because you know that around 2080 we need to start having negative emissions, and there are only a few ways to get there. One of the ways is, for example, combining biomass with CCS or having types of CCS, which is also quite sensitive.
What's a CCS?
It's carbon capture and storage. I mean, it's a sensitive topic. I know that a lot of people say, I mean, we have to understand where to apply it or how to get CO2 from the air. There's a beautiful company in Iceland that basically directly from the air extracts CO2 and stores it either in a gas form or in a fixed form. I mean, these type of technologies need to be further developed, and we need to make sure that we, as a society, place the right conditions. What are the conditions for us as a society to accept it? Of course, we shouldn't store any CO2 below rural areas, but we have some empty gas fields in the North Sea that are quite close to basically where our industry is. I want to understand what are the long run effects of this storage. I want to understand What are there any effects? What's the danger? What are the costs? And based on that, I want to make an assessment and have a decision. But on the forehand already, if biomassa is not acceptable, if CCS, carbon capture and storage is not acceptable, if nuclear is not acceptable, there will not be a lot of options on the table to really solve the problem. And of course, again, I really believe that we can do it having fully a sustainable energy grid with solar and wind, etc. At the end, that will be the equilibrium. But getting there means that we need to extract as much as possible CO2 from
the atmosphere,
from the atmosphere. And one of the technologies to do that quite cheaply and quite fast in the short run is this carbon capture and storage. And it's as we say, it's a technology that will be only interesting to apply in the upcoming, let's say, 10, 15 years. After that, I probably think that there will probably be other technologies that will be cheaper. But it's a way to fast decrease tons and tons of CO2 from the atmosphere and help us reach the 55 target in 2030.
Okay. One final question on energy policy before we move on to other topics, so that we can cover different things. So a question from the chat is, how about biofuels? What is the future for this type of fuels?
So,
if any?
I mean, again, so when it comes to biomass in general, we have to really biomass is such a big, we say it's like a container word. There are a lot of things placed inside of it that when we talk about the biomass, it's a bit, everyone thinks about, woods that are being deforested and then exported, the trees are exported to Europe to be burned. I mean, I'm against that. But there are some ways to apply biomass in a way that it is sustainable. It's a difficult one, but it can be possible. The problem I have with biofuels is that it really depends on whether they are really sustainable compared to fuels that we burn now. Producing biofuels as as a rest product, you have some rest waste and then use that rest waste, for example, in our waste management system, the last bits that cannot be recycled, to see to what extent you can use that to make biogas, and from that biogas to make, for example, biofuels. I'm not against that. But it really depends on the source. And of course, if you set up a plant, you need to have a steady supply of materials, and that's quite complex. So for me, I think we can have a number of biomass plants where they either produce electricity with rest stream of some biomaterial, or produce some biogases or biofuels out of it. But we probably cannot have a lot of these type of facilities all over Europe. So we have to have a strategic analysis where we should place them and how we can provide a steady rest stream of waste that can be basically developed into some kind of biogas or biofuel.
Okay.
But again, it's not that easy.
Yeah, like you say, it's not the one and only solution. It can be part of a wider solution where it's appropriate to do so. I understand that. So, okay, so let's say we covered the energy topic for now. I will actually have a transition, sort of question. So, but on food safety, a question again from Ikaros.
Yes.
The question is, are meat alternatives helpful in fighting climate change, or is it mainly a tool for reducing animal cruelty? What's going on with the approval of bleeding veggie meat alternative currently?
It's a very complex question, to be honest. So again, let me tell you something. One of my philosophies when it comes to tackling climate change, I really believe that climate change problem is a collective problem, and we need to come with collective solutions. And I really appreciate it when people eat less meat or fly less and live their life more sustainable. But we should watch out and not making the climate issue an individual, only creating individual solutions to tackle this collective problem. I always use the comparison with, when you have like a hot plate. If you place drips on it, that's the Dutch saying, it will not be that effective. We need to make sure that the fire below it is being is being shut down, basically. And then these individual choices of eating less meat will become significant. Up to then, I don't think it will be that significant. I once did a study where we looked at like the total effect of eating less meat, so changing your diet. And I think the project is called carboncap.eu. I think you can look at the research there. It was one of these European projects. And then eating less meat had an effect like around between 2 and 4% of the total CO2 emissions. But there was also a rebound effect, because it really depends on how these alternatives are produced. I mean, if it's soya from South America, the effect already decreases a lot. But for me, to really make sure that eating less meat is not necessarily a climate issue, but more a health issue. I think eating less meat will make sure that we as citizens will have a healthier diet. But the alternative should be accessible and also cheap compared to meat, because not everyone has the budget to go vegan, to be honest. I mean, we all know these alternatives for meat in the supermarket are quite expensive, and not especially low and middle-sized income households will have difficulties to buy these type of alternatives. But I think for me, I would approach it not from a climate perspective, but I would approach from a health perspective. Of course, as a Dutch member of parliament, I can tell you that we overproduce meat in the Netherlands. We overproduce meat, and we export most of our meat to countries outside our own country, but also outside Europe. And then it's really interesting to see whether the cost that we make as a society. So basically, I once wrote that we pay 3 times for meat in the Netherlands, for meat and dairy. Once in the supermarket, a second time via the subsidies of the common agricultural policy, and a third time to make sure that the negative effect caused by the overproduction of meat in the Netherlands, the environmental effects, the loss of biodiversity, are being we pay to make sure that that loss is minimized. And I don't think that's fair. I don't think it's fair that we overproduce veal in the Netherlands, and the amount of water needed to produce that veal is affected in the Netherlands. So basically, we use natural resources in the Netherlands to produce that type of product, and then export them to countries like Saudi Arabia or Indonesia. I don't think that's fair. I don't think that model behind it is fair, looking at when we internalize all cost to produce that type of product. But that's a different issue.
Okay. Again, transition. So you say it was a topic to look at from a health perspective. It's perfect, because now I have a health question, not related to food stuff, but to COVID. So again, a question from Igor, as usual. Is a zero strategy possible in Europe given the wonky vaccine rollout? Should Europe be ready to use such a strategy for the next pandemic?
So again, a zero strategy. What's the zero strategy?
Zero strategy is
zero infections.
Exactly. So to not necessarily enforce the lockdown, but to do track and trace, reduce as much as possible the ability for the virus to spread. Meaning, way stronger can be.
I mean, it's basically the New Zealand strategy, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, the New Zealand, the Australian strategy, etc.
Yeah, I mean, that it turned out very, very effectively, to be honest. But I mean, we don't live on an island. So for us, it's a bit more difficult, especially with the open internal market, freedom of travel. It's a bit more complex. I believe that the solution of the next pandemic is making sure that we have enough critical infrastructure to produce vaccines at a high speed. Also for for possible mutants. So to me, I think we really need to build our own infrastructure in Europe. I mean, look at BioNTech. it was a German developed mRNA vaccine, and it got 350 million euro from the German government, and I think they received approximately 100 million from the, for example, the European Investment Bank, if I'm not mistaken. But at least millions, hundreds of millions of euros were given to BioNTech, and then they lacked the facility in Europe to produce enough vaccines, so they made a deal with Pfizer, and Pfizer has a lot of facilities in the United States. So basically, it was a European developed vaccine, but we gave it away to the Americans. And the Americans have this law where they can basically say we have a ban on exports because American lives go first, and which means that we don't have enough. We are not getting the amounts that we really need to tackle this pandemic in Europe, but also globally. I mean, we've exported more than 77 million of vaccines up to now. I mean, the United Kingdom and the United States, 0. I mean, it's funny that Canada depends on Europe to get certain vaccines and is not getting anything from the United States. So we really need to think a new public-private infrastructure where we have these facilities that can develop, that can produce this type of vaccine, independent of who has wrote the code, the mRNA code, which is helpful for to tackle that specific mutant. I think we really have to rethink about how we can develop this critical infrastructure to make sure that we can fight the upcoming pandemic in a more effective and efficient way.
Still on the question of COVID, how do you explain the low rate of vaccination in the EU compared to the UK and the US? Can we catch up eventually?
Yeah, again, so in the US and in the UK, they've just made sure that they're not exporting any of the vaccines. And I think that's a silly strategy, to be honest. Why? Because even if you get your own citizens up to 100% vaccination rate, if you're not fighting this pandemic on all different fronts, I mean, we're fighting this pandemic not only in Europe, but also in Africa and in Asia and South America, etc. So if we're not fighting this war on all different fronts, we will lose at the end, because we do not know how effective the current vaccines are to tackle the maybe future mutants of this virus. So either we have to shut down all borders, and we have another argument to make sure that we have a harder migration policies on the table, or we show solidarity and make sure that we fight this pandemic as much as possible. I mean, it doesn't make any sense that the UK is not exporting their vaccines. If you look at the number of adults that they have vaccinated, and if we look at the current people that are in the hospital, that are hospitalized due to COVID, those numbers have dropped significantly by more than 90%. So the number of people in hospitals, I think it's below 5,000, I think, in the UK. So basically, the people that are in the hospital are people that already were in the hospital before they met that high target. So for them, it doesn't make any sense not to export their vaccines anymore. If they do that, they will help Europe to open up faster. And if they also share their vaccine capacity with other countries like Africa, regions like Africa, South America, and Asia, I mean, there are still I think more than 50 countries that haven't had any access to vaccination at all. Aren't we afraid to have maybe, besides the UK variant and the South Africa variant and the Brazilian variant, maybe we will get, I don't know, a Moroccan variant, an Indonesian variant. I mean, these variants can end up in Europe as well. And then the biggest threat will be, will the vaccines that we have given to people be effective against these future variants? So for us, it's the only way out of this crisis is to produce more and to make sure that every country has access to these vaccines. And we cannot wait until, because if we look at the current projections, I think 2024 is
the date for everyone to be
where people will have access for this vaccine, which is ridiculous. We can speed up production, we can give the TRIPS waiver to other production facilities all over the world and fight this pandemic together.
Actually, that's perfect. You partly answer the question I was gonna that just popped up in the chat from Lexi Brussels. So the last question before we move on from COVID, which is, what's your opinion on compulsory licenses? So you just talked about the TRIPS waiver. So can you explain quickly what is the compulsory licenses, the TRIPS waiver kind of debate, and how you stand on it?
So basically, the TRIPS agreement is how we deal with intellectual property under the World Trade Organization. So there's a way to protect intellectual property, licensing, to make sure that all countries that are that fall under the World Trade Organization respect intellectual IP from other countries. That's basically it. But under the TRIPS waiver, you can waive and make sure that other countries are allowed to use technologies to make sure that they can fight the pandemic in their own country. That's basically what's behind this. And every government under this TRIPS waiver, but also under their own legislation, have the ability to have this to give away a compulsory license. And of course, only the license without the data doesn't make any sense. But normally, I would say, okay, we have to make sure that when you invest approximately 1.5 to 2 billions of euros into a vaccine, then you need, and it takes usually 10 to 15 years to develop a medicine or a vaccine. We need to give these companies the opportunity to basically have enough revenue to basically pay back the investments that they made. I'm not against that, but when we look at the current pandemic, and we look at the vaccines, who developed them? That's a very interesting question, because I do believe that the vast. I mean, I can tell you even the numbers. AstraZeneca has almost only government and non-for-profit money. So basically, NGOs and government has financed the full development of that vaccine. And then it ended up, AstraZeneca made a deal with Oxford and got it. When we look at Novavax, exactly the same thing. CureVac, more than 2/3 of the investments were public. Only less than 1/3 was private. Moderna, 100% developed by public money. Johnson & Johnson, the same. Pfizer, 2/3 approximately, the same. The only one that was almost fully privately financed was Sanofi, and they failed to develop a vaccine. So we're talking about products that were produced and developed. That were developed by public money. Why aren't we calling them public goods? Why are we allowing these big pharmaceuticals that have indeed the critical infrastructure to make ridiculous revenues? I mean, if we looked at the papers in the beginning of January, we've seen that all these companies have made the highest revenues they've ever made in their history. I mean, I'm not a communist. I'm not against making money. I'm just saying that we're fighting a pandemic. If the problem is money, I can start up, a GoFundMe page, and I think a lot of small and medium-sized entrepreneurs will finance me because they had to close their shops for months and months and months. Some of my friends have eaten up their whole pension to make sure that they don't close up their shop. I mean, who should I fight for? These big pharmaceuticals that got our publicly developed vaccines and are making a lot of money out of it? Or should I fight to make sure that we produce enough vaccines? Of course, we will give them we will pay them a price. We will not take it away from them. We will give them a fair amount for that, to make sure we fight this pandemic and to make sure we open up our countries all over the world as soon as possible. That, I think, already should. I mean, if you look at the economic damage that we are experiencing now, there's no reason behind not to take back your license or not to force them to work with other pharmaceutical countries. I mean, again, when we did the advanced purchase agreements, we did it with a lot of pharmaceutical companies, also ones that failed, and we took the risk publicly. So we gave them money, partly to develop the vaccines, but also partly to develop the infrastructure. Why? I mean, we've seen it, for example, with Sanofi. They are working with Pfizer, so they failed to develop something themselves, but they said, we will have a collaboration with Pfizer. We will start making their vaccine in our facilities. There are other big pharmaceutical companies that are also available to help the AstraZenecas, the Modernas, the Johnsons, the Novavax in this world that have succeeded in developing a new vaccine, or in a vaccine that works, to use their facilities to produce that same vaccine, to make sure that not 2024 is the latest moment that people in the world will be provided with a vaccine, but let's say the end of 2022. Let's not lose 2 years.
Okay,
for me,
that's pretty clear. That's pretty clear. And Lexi, who has a question, find that you have a very well developed argument. She agrees and she thanks you for your answer. So now let's go back a bit higher. We've delved a bit into the details, and actually someone, so Dagger Merzat, actually just popped up in the chat and following the stream, and so he's discovering, okay, you're an MEP, and so he has a question which actually we have not covered in a while, is what do you do as a member of the European Parliament? So let's go back big picture. Can you summarize very quickly what does a member of the European Parliament do?
I can only answer it for myself. I mean,
yeah,
I don't
of course.
Whether my colleagues, what we do in general. Do you want to have my week planning approximately? I mean, we deal with legal with reports, with legal issues. I mean, we try to create laws on all different type of topics, but that's the life of a politician. We debate. I mean, but for me, I mean, as a member of parliament, I try to follow certain files. I try to be a rapporteur in certain files to make sure that I'm in the lead for my group. To make sure that I'm the one representing my group in a file that I'm more than average interested in. For example, carbon border adjustment mechanism is one of the files that I'm very interested in. Emission trading system, which will come up. But what we do is we try to develop or create new laws, or in Europe they're called directives or
regulations.
Regulations. That's what we do on all type of different topics, and then we try to reassess them and try to make sure that we try to review them and develop and adjust them maybe for the new situation we live in. That's basically the core work of the European Parliament. But for me, I also like to talk with young people, with people from NGOs, with people from the unions, to see whether they have certain issues that they deal with on a day-to-day basis or in their country, and then I see to what extent I can be helpful. So I ask questions to the Commission, have debates with people working at the Commission to see how we can solve certain questions without without creating a new law, or sometimes just guide people to the right directive or the right people to make sure that they can help them in the issue that they are dealing with. I mean, so basically we call that, I think, and I don't know the English word, ombudswerk. How do you say it in English?
Ombudswerk.
Ombudswerk. It's
like ombudsman, I would say in English, but I don't think that's...
Yeah, the ombudsman. Yeah. But when I was a member of the local council, one of the things I liked most was, I had like my office hour once a week where people came with all kinds of problems that they dealt with or that they had, and sometimes they were really small. You had this issue with the municipality on something small, and then I connected them with the right, civil servant, or I went with them to do the application, or I remember that once I was very interested in this unemployment welfare benefits. And then I went with one of the people to see how that went. How when you went to apply, how they treated them, how they talked with them. And I just went. I was quite young. I just went without a suit, having just normal clothes, and I was really shocked. And the way the way people had to go through that process, I thought it was really way too unfriendly, to be honest, and sometimes even a little bit humiliating. And so for me, one of the most things that I really miss in Europe is being really close to our citizens, to understand how can I improve their life, and not with some directive that we work with and then in 2 years gets implemented and then hopefully implemented in the right way. That's something I really miss as being a politician, really fighting for the people that voted for you on things that you can change, tomorrow, and not in the long run.
Yeah, that's the issue
it's not
to an
answering
extent.
The question.
Well, you covered it. You definitely covered it. But that's indeed one of the issues that comes up regularly with the European politics and European Parliament is the counterbalancing part of having a very technical and very legalistic parliament. You are far away from the everyday concerns of the citizen. That sometimes makes it complicated to explain to everyday citizens. Okay, what do you do? Well, I prepare the directive on some very technical, specific thing that you will never hear about. So it's a way kind of a struggle.
Exactly. But for example, one of the things that I really like is like the renovation wave that within the European Green Deal. I really have to see how it will be implemented by the national governments. But I really believe that it's one of the first one of the parts within the European Green Deal where people directly can benefit from money that they can use to, for example, isolate their house. And I really believe that Europe has to sometimes create laws that directly will influence the life of people or will make sure that people directly can benefit from policies coming from the EU and not waiting 2 or 3 years before they will be implemented in like national legislation. We've all seen, for example, the roaming. The roaming was I think one of the most successful fights there was in the European Parliament. I wasn't an MEP at that time, but for me that was one of the clearest policies that I could mention when I was young.
Exactly. Roaming, Erasmus, GDPR. Those are the flagships.
Exactly.
The flagship.
Exactly.
And I think that's what
we
need.
Need those flagships. But we really need those flagships once in a while to make sure that the European project makes sense and works for the best of me as a citizen.
Okay, we're reaching an hour, so I will ask you one more question that is becoming tradition on the channel. Is where do you stand on the EU federalism? Are you federalist? Are you not federalist? Where do you stand on that?
To be honest, I mean, I think one of the first time I was in Strasbourg, there was like a demonstration, and the Catalans I could identify directly, but there was another group of people, and then I asked people, what's their fight? And they were federalists. And for me, it's not a zero-sum game, and I don't think we should approach it from that. Either you're a federalist or you're not a federalist. For me, it's what makes sense. Do we really need to talk on what level do we need to debate on what type of topic? And I really believe that, of course, we need to work together more and more, and we need to get rid of all this negativity around Europe. I really detest members of politicians that in Brussels have another face, and then when they go back to the member state, they have another face. They act as if Brussels is an invisible hand that makes decisions without us having any interference with it. I always tell my friends in the Netherlands, Brussels is the Netherlands, and the Netherlands is Brussels. There are Dutch people within the Commission, within the civil servants, within the Parliament, within the Council that sit on the table and are influencing the procedures as much as any other person. So when they go to the Hague and state that Brussels did or Brussels did that, they have to be honest and say, I did this or I did that. Why didn't you veto it? Why didn't you block it? Why didn't you ask for a different? Why did you at the end accept the compromise? I mean, for me, it's really important that we on the European level fight the right fights, tackle the right issues that go far and beyond our borders. And we can name them: migration, climate change, our economy, our monetary union, our industry policy. Do we really want to fight the US on the one side and China on the other side when it comes to digitalization? Do we really want to fight that like on the member state level? It will be funny. It's like David versus Goliath, but I can tell you the outcome will be different.
Mm-hmm.
David will not win. He will get crushed. So we have to stick together as one group and make sure we win. But at the end of the day, that doesn't make you less French or less,
of course, I agree.
Czech or less Croatian.
Yeah.
And the issues we need to fight on the local municipal level or on the regional level or on a member state level, those issues should be tackled on a member state level. If we can collaborate together to make sure we solve them in a smarter way, in a more effective way, we should do it. But does that make me a federalist or not? I'm not against this word. I mean, this idea that we are developing a super state, I mean, it's not existing. It's not existing.
Yeah, exactly.
We need to democratize the European Parliament more. The European Parliament needs to have more powers. Why? Not to get rid of powers from the local, from the national parliaments. No, to make sure we have the right counterbalance. Yeah, because when there's power, you need to counterbalance it on the European level. And now on some issues, I really sometimes think, okay, the European Council has decided this, and now we have to sign our name. That's it, to sign at the dot. So
yeah, it's about balance, check and balance. So yeah, okay.
But also, I mean, at the end of the day, we need to make sure that people are way more active and more aware of what is happening in Europe. That's a process not only from people like me that need to join these type of debates, but also from the media. I mean, they should report from Brussels, not only when there's a fight or when there's something going on that's very interesting and sexy to talk about in the media, but also when nice policy is coming from Europe, policy that really helps people in their day-to-day issues, and we all have to make sure that we have the right role there.
No, of course,
that's
interesting.
Will be very complex.
That's interesting. Like I was telling you before, I used to be an assistant in the parliament, and it's funny because one of my former MEP used to say about Europe and the media, well, Europe is not once every 5 years, it's every day, and so the media should talk about it every day. It's not like, oh, okay, there's a European election, Europe happens once every 5 years, we do the quota and then move on. See you in 5 years. So that's not how it works, and that's not how it should work. Okay, and the very final thing.
Can I give you one anecdote? Because this just happened. My colleague Lara Wolters, my colleague in the European Parliament, is working on this own initiative report on due diligence. The day it was voted in the Parliament in favor, that day in the Dutch media there was a debate about about due diligence, and the national Parliament, they had a motion for resolution about due diligence, and it was talked about on all news media. At the same day, in the European Parliament, an initiative report was voted in favor. No one talked about it, which is ridiculous. So there was a debate on, we have to make sure about responsibility of companies, etc., and no one was looking at that Europe already made this plan on the European base, because we have to do it on the European base.
Yeah, of course, otherwise it doesn't make sense. Yeah,
makes sense. But no, I was like flabbergasted. How come? I mean, you talk about something that needs to be done, but it was done already, but you didn't notice it.
Yeah, that's a bit of a facepalm moment. I can
don't go to Brussels. I mean, do not only go to Brussels when there's a council fight about who's getting what when it comes to allegations of budgets. Don't only go to Brussels when there's a fight about the common agricultural policies. I mean, that's normal, or people go, you see the vast amounts of media going to these council meetings and what will be the outcome? Will they have a deal or not? also go on the other days where European members of the European Parliament are fighting to make sure that the position of their citizens, of their constituents, is put on the right place. On an everyday basis, we try to do that. Not only during the council meetings. That's completely. Why. And I really hope in the future. I thank you for your invite. I'm more than welcome, available to have another debate or discussion with people on. I will
Twitch. take you up to that offer, but
hopefully I wasn't that boring.
No. Actually, that was very very interesting. And the chat, from what I see from the chat was very happy with your answers. So. Would you like to give a final word before you have to go and I start the post-interview talk?
I mean, I have nothing to say. I hope that among the viewers there are more people than only my family and members of the staff. I hope that... Hello, Mom.
There are, don't worry.
No, I mean, I'm quite passionate about the topics that I'm fighting for. I'm quite passionate about the work I'm doing in the European Parliament. It's not always easy, but I'm doing my best. But I encourage all young people listening, get involved in politics. Don't let old people decide about your future. I mean, that's very important. Go when there are elections and the local council, go, join, talk to them, debate them, invite them. If there are regional elections, go, invite yourself. Make your own party if you don't like the parties that exist in your country. Go, join, participate. Because the topics that we're fighting on today, digitalization, climate change, are too big to leave to other people. So that's my invite. And you're never too young to join politics, because you all have your own experience, your own visions, and your own ideas to place on the table. And I hope in the future I see a much more diverse European Parliament and other parliaments all over Europe. And I also hope to see more and more young people that come with the bright new ideas to make sure we get good legislation and good compromise on the table, not only for themselves, but also for the future generations. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chahim.
And of course, follow me on Instagram and Twitter.
That's what I was gonna say. Thank you for coming. Chat, make sure to thank him and go check him out on. I put his Twitter handle on the image right now, and you can find also his Instagram, his YouTube channel, everything on the European page. So make sure to follow him, and we'll see if we can have you again here. It was very interesting.
Thank you, man.
And on this note, I wish you a good night, and I will start my post-interview.
Thank you. Good luck. Good luck. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. All right. So let's start this debrief with almost 15 minutes late, but that was very, very interesting. I really enjoyed the discussion and looking at the reaction in the chat overall. I think everyone shares the interest. I think indeed it was very interesting, and what makes it even more interesting for those of you who followed the previous interview like a couple of weeks ago with the Green MEP. Actually, they covered, and I didn't know that back then, they covered more or less the same issue. So you were able to see tonight the perspective. So 2 weeks ago you saw the classic green perspective on energy debates, environmental policy and this kind of thing, and today we heard about the socialists and what I would call like not a more balanced, because that would imply judgment, but a less clear-cut approach to these issue, which was quite interesting. So I mean, I noted a few things that he said. That so his whole approach, if to summarize things, is that he has no dogma. There is no one-size-fits-all solution. It has to be a collective effort that takes every kind of solution on board. So I think that's something that he must argue regularly with the Greens on whether nuclear should be part of the solution. He says that he is not against having nuclear being part of the transition energy mix. So I'm sure that must make some some interesting discussions in negotiations, and that's indeed like something that comes up often whenever you have these very technical, very that requires a lot of expertise, technical expertise, debates in the parliament, where you have the more ideological approach, whether it's on the right, on the left, whatever, and the approach that is less dogmatic. Say, okay, we need a solution, and we can use everything that is available in the toolbox, and then that's politics taking place. And then what did I take note? Yeah, one answer that is classic, it's complicated. Yeah. Whenever you're talking about EU politics and politics generally speaking, the honest answer should always be it's complicated. I mean, it's also a lawyer joke that the answer is it depends and it's complicated, but that's very true, because complicated issues, and most issues are complicated, require complex solutions, and complex solutions are not clear-cut. There is rarely, I mean, politics would be extremely easy if it was always a choice between a good and a bad decision. In many cases, it's not like that. It's a choice between bad solutions, a set of bad solutions, or a set of more or less good solutions. So it's always about picking and choosing in the toolbox what you want to do. But it's always complicated, and that's what always makes. Should be always worried about people who tells you that something is very simple, because usually in reality it is not, unless you have an ideological approach, which in some cases can be justified. There are topics where you have to be principle based, but it's complicated. Is pretty much a summary of EU politics and politics at large, and why you have, I mean, politicians, where you have lobbying, where you have all these things. Something that was also interesting is when he was talking about his experience at a municipal level. So he was saying about how he enjoy having once a week meeting his constituents to talk about their small problems, if you can call that small problem. That was interesting, because I had also one of my boss also was a mayor, and he told me exactly the same thing. He was saying back then, he was telling me exactly the same thing, that sometimes you have to take the time in, get people tell you about the small problem and help them. And he was telling me, I mean, he always had this policy that whenever we would receive email from citizens about even the most dumb or easiest question, we should always answer, even to redirect them to people or send a letter of recommendation or whatever, because sometimes, well, that for starters, it showed people that you care, and second, even the small thing comes sometimes as like a politician intervening, like writing a letter, say, oh yeah, well, that's important what this person is saying. That can make a difference for people and their so-called small problems. So that's something that also comes up quite often whenever you're talking to politicians and MEP. And again, another thing related thing that you mentioned is the difficulty how easy it can be to be cut from the not from your roots. That would be a bit cheesy to say it like that, but to be cut from the everyday citizen, because, well, you are in Brussels, you deal with very complicated issue, to an extent you are in your ivory tower, and so it makes things complicated to when you have to go back home and explain, okay, what do I do in Parliament, and in a way explain that in a way that doesn't require a PhD to understand. So that's always kind of the difficulty that MEPs find, and the balance that they have to find between getting involved in topics that are very complicated and that require a lot of expertise and a lot of time, and at the same time, well, explaining what they do and solving this issue in a way that are significant for people. And that brings us to the next thing. We were talking about the flagships laws, so the laws that are recognizable for citizens, that they know, oh yeah, the EU did that, and in a way see, oh well, we got that thanks to the EU, and that's so we talked about the roaming, that's Erasmus, that's GDPR, so data protection policies, these kind of things that have a more or less direct impact on citizens. I mean, I would say that most EU policies have a direct impact on citizens, but that they can see and understand how it affects them. And actually, I think it's quite key in defending the EU project. I see Carl saying copyright directive is a flagship policy. CMV. What's CMV? But yeah, I would agree that it's a flagship policy. Change your life. Okay. Well, to an extent it is, but I won't go into the details of that tonight. But it's important, these flagships things, because if you talk about the generation of, well, my parents, your grandparents, etc., etc. A lot of them will say, oh well, Europe is good because it's peace. It brought us peace, and that's true. That's very true. The problem is that for people from my generation, people that are younger, so let's say the people that are less than 30, yes, everyone will say, yeah, of course, Europe is peace is important, but that doesn't mean anything, because we've been lucky enough to never know war, or never know directly people who have been in war. So for us, it's more theoretical. And the reason why, for instance, the reason why people are in favor of Europe is no longer because it's peace; it's because they see direct benefit of it. Erasmus is a direct benefit of it. I mean, there's a reason why they call people from between 30 and 40 the Erasmus generation, because as a generation that discovered Europe through Erasmus and that became European thanks to Erasmus. And that's, I believe that in the world of today, Erasmus is making much more Europeans and pro-European people than the peace project. Even if it's important, it has a direct and the libido was happy for it. Yeah, indeed. But all to say that this is something that has a direct impact on them, and that's what matters. If you want to sell the European political project, it's doing that. Okay, so we have Das Thoughts saying, does Europe have a starship? America has a starship. What is Europe doing not making starship? Seems like Europe needs to step up its space game. Actually, that's actually space policy is indeed something that is ramping up. I mean, historically speaking, the EU has to an extent a space policy by co-financing things like the Arianespace, Airbus, so companies that deal in space programs, the European Space Agency, like Europe just said. So there is already a space program. I mean, it's not like we develop like the space shuttle like the US have, but we have Arianespace, we have the fusée Ariane, etc., etc. But yeah, I agree that Europe needs to step up its space game, and I think that it is something that is developing. And actually, as a joke, you're saying that there is you need to get out there to mine all these asteroids full of gold and platinum. Actually, I've read like a few years ago, I don't know if it still exists, but I read that there was a company that was created in Luxembourg to specifically work on that, to try to study the possibility and the commercialization, the commercial model of sending drones on asteroids, mine them, and bring that back on Earth. So it's actually something that is seriously studied as a business model. So let's see what else do we have as comments. So feel free. I'm rambling, but feel free to pitch in. Europe is like our brother. We want you to be successful, to come into the south with us. Join us, Europe. We need to colonize Mars. You don't want Mars getting a part of that. Well, I think China will definitely get a part in Mars, but okay. And now it's someone wants to secure Europa for the memes. That's also a noble cause, but that'll be a bit more complicated to go to Jupiter. Europa is around Jupiter, yeah. Yeah, I think so. I'll double check. Or in any case, I'm sure you will. Okay, let's see. Let's see. Did I miss any questions, any remarks that you did? Tons of jokes. GPS system, indeed. The European system is called the Galileo, which is indeed better than the, more precise than the current GPS one, and actually that pissed off a bit the UK because, well, they were a bit locked out of the Galileo after Brexit. Not completely, but for some sensitive parts. So, for instance, for military communication, they were cut out of access to Galileo. So they said that they would do their own satellite GPS thing. Well, I'm not sure if it is gonna work out for them, but anyway. Apparently, I'm not funny, but I have self-control issues, so I post anyway. If they are a living creature on Europe, would they be called Europeans? That would be an argument. That would be an argument. Okay, well, I'm looking at the time, so I think we should wrap up. Let me see. Lack information in media coverage, but it has been overshadowed by the pandemic. The stream peaked right there, says Karos. Always wrap up. Yeah, we always wrap up. Anyway, so I hope that you enjoyed the interview tonight. It was on my side, I found it very interesting. So as usual, don't hesitate to give me feedback on Twitter here or on Discord. As usual, the links are in my bio, so feel free to join, follow, and all that. It's always good fun, and that helps the channel, so don't hesitate to do that. Next week, we are not staying green, we're going back green with an interview with Czech MEP Markéta Gregorova from the Green Group. So be sure to tune in. It's going to be at the usual time at 8:30, and Ikarov is going to be happy. There's a good chance it's going to happen in-game, so not like a Zoom interview like we did, but we are actually probably going to play some game while doing the interview, so Ikarov will be happy. So, on this note, thank you again for being here tonight. Thanks for those of you who subscribes again to the channel. Thank you to the new followers, and I wish you all a good night. See you soon, and next week actually. Bye everyone.